So this is a demonstration of the Battle Brothers Evaluator, which is the successor to the Battle Brothers Calculator, which I also made, and I did a video demo of it, and I posted it up on the Battle Brothers subreddit many years ago. This is the Battle Brothers Evaluator. I think that was a little better name to describe what it does, and has many of the same features, just much improved. So the main features are this is he good form and kind of how the roles interact with it. So let's open this form up first and show the basics. So we can kind of evaluate the different backgrounds here. We'll go ahead and pick the companion bow. If I hit averages here, that would be level 1 average starting stats. And note when I hit that, it enters in all of those stats. For the companion backgrounds, it will also add in their stars. That would not happen for any of the other backgrounds that you'd be expected to enter that yourself, essentially. But it will put them in for the companion backgrounds. Important to note that I intend this form to be used after you've hired the brother. Now, if you look at these traits here, note that you don't see a trait like Dexterous in here. Dexterous only adds a stat, +5 melee attack in this case. You will see some traits where they add a stat and do something else, but selecting that trait would not add any stats as far as the numbers over here are concerned. Like I said, that's because after you've hired the brother, those traits are applied to his stat sheet already. So all you have to do is just copy the stat sheet after you've hired him, and you're good to go. Now, I have a mod which lets me see all of their stats after I train them. So I use this form sometimes before I hire the brother. In that case, you would need to add the 5 melee attack, because when you're looking at them before you've hired them, it doesn't have that trait applied, essentially. So that's how that works. We're going to go ahead and click this right here, which is going to roll him 10 levels up to level 11 in this case. And what it's showing here is what these stats would be if you invested into every single one, every single level. What the minimum would be, what the average would be, and what the max would be. Note that if there's 2 stars, those are all the same, as you get the same consistent roll every single time. The rest of them, it's going to be a little variable, obviously. And the real power starts to come in when we start to add rolls here. So let's go ahead and add a roll. We're going to add an archer roll. Focus would be ranged damage. Now, this roll prestige is kind of how strict you're going to make the requirements for this roll. The most strict requirements would be the most prestigious. In this case, the most prestigious would be 1. 5 would be the least prestigious. I'm going to say this is going to be a 2. So we'll go ahead and create the roll. And as you can see, you can enter a whole bunch of different details about this roll. We won't do that here, but there's a spot for perk, build, weapons, armor, description. But the main part of the roll is the stat priorities. So we'll start there. The first stat priority for an archer is going to be range attack. I'm going to say that's going to be 70% of the weight in this case. It's a 100% or 100-point weighted system. So 70% of the grade is going to come from their range attack. Now, the desired level 11 value, I'll put 95. The floor in this case would be essentially kind of a D- or 50% grade. So if I made the floor 80 for this, if the brother we're evaluating would average 80 at level 11 for their range attack, they would get 50% for the grade for this stat priority, which would come out to 35, or half of 70, which is the weight. Go ahead and add that priority. Second priority for an archer for me is going to be definitely fatigue. I want them to have quite a bit of fatigue. It's good if they can shoot lots of arrows. We'll put 145 for the desired level 11 value, and we'll put 125 for the floor. Now, you can do 4 priorities. I never use range defense for any roll personally, so this is going to be just hit points for me. We only have 10% left, so that's going to be 10. And we'll put 85 for the desired level 11. Note that's if you're investing into it every single level. And we'll put 70 for the floor. And now note it's a valid roll because we're at 100 stat weight total, 100%. So a stat minimum, this is going to be for a stat that's not a stat priority. So note if I open this, you don't see range attack, fatigue, or hit points in here. This would be more common for a frontliner roll where you want a minimum level of resolve typically. But I'll demonstrate it for this roll. We'll put it for a relatively low number. This is a backliner after all. And what the penalty weight, how this works is it's going to be a full percentage point if I put this per point that they miss this minimum by. So if they have 25 starting resolve, and we're not investing into resolve in this roll, hopefully, obviously, they're going to get a 5 percentage point penalty to their grade. So I'll add that in. I'm going to remove it because I usually wouldn't do it for a backline roll. Up to you though. For the traits here, so you can add bonuses or penalties for different traits too. So Iron Lungs is obviously good for most rolls. And this is grade adjustment here is the exact same as a minimum. So if I put 3, that's 3 full percentage points added to the grade if they have this trait. So go ahead and save this. And once it's saved, note that it fills in the best background, which is a hunter in this case. And this score is essentially based on if they had 3 stars in the top 3 stat priorities and started with, I believe, average starting stats and got average rolls based on 3 stars. That's what the score would be. Essentially 108%. They would go over the desired values, essentially the hunter would. And if I close this, it's kind of a bug. It doesn't show up right when you save there. But if I reopen the roll, it does fill in the roll difficulty. That's based on a calculation for every single background, all 64 of them, where it takes the roll, it gives them average starting stats, it gives them 2 stars in the top 3 stat priorities, rolls them to level 11 and sees if they would get an A. So the hunter is the only roll that could actually do that. It's a pretty difficult roll to fill, obviously. So go ahead and close this, and we'll go back to the Is He Good form. And now if we roll him again, now that we have a roll, it will actually, it always selects the top roll. So it selects the roll by default, the archer roll here. Note, if you hit this, you can kind of see all the details for it. Now it's showing the grade here is 78.3% for this brother, or a C+ for this roll. And we can see his grade for each of the priorities here too. So for range attack, it gives the details here, our floor of 80, our desired value at level 11 of 95. The max is based on the max for the best background. And this brother would be 90 at level 11 and would be 5 points short. So that is an 83% for the grade for that individual priority. And it shows a raw percentage contribution to his grade there too, which is 58.3%. Now this is a great demonstration of the floor here with fatigue. The brother is going to be at 125, which is the floor. Remember, the floor is 50% or a D- kind of. And so they get 50% of 20, which comes out to 10. And then this brother is right at the desired value, so it gets 100% or 10 raw contribution out of the 10 weight. So that's where the rolls come in. Let's go ahead and close this form and go back here. I'm going to go ahead and delete this roll. And I'm going to reveal kind of a little secret I've been hiding here by going into Design View. And we're going to show all of this stuff here. So one thing that I tried to do with this system is I tried to make it flexible, like I said, so you can create your own roles, but I also tried to make it so you can share roles too. So if I go out to my temp folder here on my C drive, I already have some XML files here, which are roles that I've already done. So I'm going to grab that file, hit OK, and then we're going to import those. And it's going to ask about calculating background scores. Remember when I created that role, it showed the best backgrounds. This is kind of what it's talking about there. I'll go ahead and say yes. It doesn't take horribly long for it to do. But now it is importing a whole bunch of roles here. Now, like I said, the intent of this is so that people can share different roles and exchange them. You can also actually just get it in string form too. So if you hit show selected roles XML, it'll just open it in kind of a form and you can copy it and then you could go and paste it into a forum post, for example, and that would be a very easy way to share with other people. And perfect timing, this is done. We'll hit OK and you can see there's a whole bunch of roles here. Now I'm kind of planning to maybe provide a copy that has all of these and maybe one that's clean where these are not in here. These are the roles that I use. And you can see there's a reason there's a credit to field kind of in this, because a lot of the ones that I use actually are not mine. They're ones that somebody else made. So I'm actually going to close this database here. We're going to open up this one instead. And yes, that's JJ McCarthy. He's the future. So you will get this the first time you open up to, There's a bunch of VBA code in this, and you're just going to have to take my word for it that there's nothing malicious in there. Although if you want, you can actually look at it. But I'm going to enable this here. So speaking of looking at the code, let's talk about this toggle navigation pane real quick. If you want to see what's in this database, you can hit that, and here's everything that makes up this system. This is all the code here. If you hit Alt F11 on your keyboard, that opens up the code window as well, and you can get kind of all the same thing there. Here's all the... This is actually fully object-oriented, so these are different object classes right there. And then you can hide that navigation pane. But you do need to enable the content in order for this to work at all, because there is a lot of VBA code that makes this actually work. So you can see in this version, we have something additional on this first opening main menu here. So I love to use this guide. I did not make this guide. It's a really, really good guide. I'm going to double click it so we can show it for a second here. As you can see, it's extremely highly awarded and has all kinds of roles in here and all kinds of great information. Like I said, I refer to it all the time. Most of the builds in my system are based off this and credited to this author as well. And you know it's good because the word Catal is in there 22 times. So if we look at these roles here, like I said, most of them are credited to that same author and are actually my best effort to recreate them within this system, the different roles that he had in mind. UB stands for Unrivaled Build, which is actually in his guide if you look at it. So that kind of gets the message across. These are very, very high-end builds. That's why the stat requirements for them are very high. And I think they're great. You might not like them, but like I said, this is a very flexible system. If you want, you can delete all of these and make all of your own and go forward from there. I think it's good to have some roles if you're new to the game personally. And I think his guide is awesome. I think the roles are really good too. So we'll do a demonstration kind of with these roles here, and I'll show you, we'll kind of talk a little bit more about how I like to use the system. But if we let's take a Hedge Knight, because we're going to go for kind of some of these high-end ones. And we'll say he has average starting stats, but we'll say that he did pretty darn well in the Star Lottery here. And we'll go ahead and roll him to 11. We'll see how he does. And as you can see here, it likes him for a lot of roles. Now, how it sorts this, because note that it's not completely by grade, because he gets higher grades for some of these roles here. It actually sorts first by prestige level. And that's kind of reflecting the fact that these are harder to fill, thus they're going to get a lower grade than the less prestigious and less hard to fill roles. So that's why it sorts by prestige first and then grade. And if we click through these different ones, it'll change this over here and show you how he does against these different requirements for these different roles. But obviously a Hedge Knight does pretty well, especially if he gets good stars for a lot of these. Now, something else I kind of wanted to show too is if he didn't do so well in his stars, let's say you hired him and he didn't get any in the right stuff at least, we'll throw some in here just so he has some stars and some stuff. But he did not do well. And as you can see here, now he doesn't actually do nearly as well for any of those roles. And note that those Prestige 1 roles went down here too. So the reason for that is there's a cutoff point. If they miss the cutoff point for the grade, it puts them to the bottom of the sort order. The cutoff point, I believe, is 77% or a C+. And there's a very important reason that I did that. And the reason that I did that is to kind of show that for me, when I'm playing the game, I'm not necessarily looking for an A+ for the role. It'd be great if I got an A+, but I have brothers in my regimen all the time that didn't have an A+ for that role, but I needed somebody for that role. Maybe they had a B or a B-. And maybe I changed the build a little bit because they're lacking in a certain area. So I think you should be expected to adjust according to what exactly your brother is, and you shouldn't expect every brother to be an A+. And that's part of the reason I set the standards pretty high too, especially for like the 100% grade, because I don't expect many brothers to be able to get an A+. I take plenty of brothers for roles who are B's, B-, B+, whatever. Sometimes even like a C+, just because I really need that role. So that's pretty much everything I wanted to show with this system. The last thing I wanted to talk about, and this will apply to some of you more than others, is exactly how you use this. So Some of you may have realized already this is a Microsoft Access database. That's why it says Access here, Access 2007-2016 file format. ACCDB is short for Access Database. It's one self-enclosed file, so you don't need to really install Battle Brothers Evaluator. What you need to have installed, though, is a version of Access in order to use this. Now, some of you might already have a full version of Access. Just so you know, if you want to be able to look at my code and stuff like that, or if you want to be able to, like, for example, just open this up in Design View, you need the full version of Access. If you don't have that, you can download Access Runtime. So Access Runtime will run an Access database, in this case Battle Brothers Evaluator. You just can't design with it, essentially. But it's totally free. You can download and install it, and then you just need to download the Battle Brothers Evaluator file, which I'll include a link to in the YouTube description, as well as probably the post on the subreddit for Battle Brothers 2. Download the file, make sure to enable content when you open it, and then you're ready to use Battle Brothers Evaluators.